The quiet beginning. The city lights glowed softly against the dark sky. It was one of those nights when the streets seemed alive, yet strangely peaceful. In a quiet corner of Los Angeles, far from cameras and flashing lights, Keanu Reeves stood waiting. He wore his usual simple clothes. Nothing flashy, just a plain jacket and jeans. People passed him by, some recognizing him, most not daring to disturb. He looked calm, yet his eyes carried a depth, as if he was lost in thought. A black car slowly pulled up. From the passenger seat stepped Sandra Bullock. She looked almost the same as she did years ago when the world first saw her beside Keanu in movies. But tonight, there was no movie set, no stage lights, only the glow of the city and the hush of midnight air. She smiled when she saw him, a smile not for cameras, but for a friend who had always been there in silence. The moment their eyes met, something invisible passed between them. It was not romance in the loud way people expect from stars. It was something softer, something real. Two souls who had carried heavy weights, meeting again to share a night of peace. "You still wait the same way," Sandra said, her voice warm. Keanu chuckled softly. "And you still arrived the same way, calm but glowing." They walked together, not towards a big restaurant, not to some expensive show, but down a quiet street where small lights hung between buildings. There was a little diner, the kind where no one expected Hollywood stars to sit. That was the point. Keanu had chosen it because he wanted something simple, something honest. Inside the diner, an old man greeted them. He did not rush to take photos or call others. He just nodded politely, as if he understood that tonight was not about fame, but about being human. They sat in a booth near the window. Outside, neon lights reflected on the glass. Inside, the air smelled of fresh coffee and baked pie. For a while, they said nothing, just sitting in silence, breathing, letting the comfort of each other's presence speak louder than words. Finally, Sandra spoke. "Do you ever feel like the world forgets that we are people?" Keanu looked at her, his eyes soft but thoughtful. "All the time. They see the roles, the movies, the red carpets, but not the nights we go home and sit in the dark, wondering if we are enough." Her face grew serious. "I had nights like that. Even when I won awards, I felt empty. I thought no one would understand. But then I remembered conversations with you. You never judged. You just listened." The weight of her words filled the booth. The diner grew quieter. It was as if the universe wanted to pause and let this moment exist. Keanu leaned back, his voice low but steady. "We all carry invisible battles. But sometimes when someone sits beside us, even in silence, the weight feels lighter." There was a pause. Sandra's eyes glistened slightly, not from sadness, but from the honesty of being understood. The old man returned with 2 cups of coffee. His hands shook slightly as he placed them down. "On the house," he whispered, then walked away. Sandra looked at the steaming cup and smiled. "See? Kindness exists everywhere, even in the smallest corners." Keanu nodded slowly. "Yes, and it's often the smallest acts that stay with us forever." They sipped their coffee in silence. But behind their quietness lay years of memories, years of struggles, years of being misunderstood by a world that thought fame meant happiness. Then, almost suddenly, Sandra's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and her smile faded. Keanu noticed but said nothing. She placed the phone face down on the table, her hands trembling slightly. "Bad news?" he asked gently. She hesitated. "Just something personal. Something I didn't want to face tonight." He didn't press further. He only said, "You don't have to face it alone." Her eyes softened again. "That's what makes you different, Keanu. You don't rush to fix everything. You just stay. And sometimes staying means more than solving." Outside, a car horn echoed, but inside the diner, the silence wrapped around them like a protective shield. But then, something unexpected happened. A young boy, no older than 12, walked hesitantly into the diner. He looked nervous, holding a small, worn-out notebook. The old man at the counter asked if he was lost, but the boy only looked at Keanu and Sandra. With slow steps, the boy approached their booth. His voice shook. Are you really Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock?" They exchanged a glance, unsure whether to confirm. Finally, Keanu smiled gently. "Yes, But tonight, we're just people having coffee." The boy's eyes widened, but instead of asking for a picture, he placed the notebook on the table. "My mom is sick. She always said you two made her smile when she was sad. Can you write something for her? Maybe it will make her strong again." The diner grew even quieter. Even the old man stopped wiping the counter to listen. Sandra's hand shook slightly as she opened the notebook. Inside were pages of scribbles, small poems and drawings. Clearly the boy's attempts to cheer his mother. Tears welled in her eyes. "What's her name?" she asked softly. "Clara," the boy whispered. Keanu took the pen first. He wrote slowly, carefully, as if every word carried weight. Then he passed it to Sandra. She wrote too, her handwriting neat, her message filled with warmth. When they handed the notebook back, the boy clutched it as if it were treasure. "Thank you," he whispered. "You don't know how much this means." As he walked away, Sandra looked at Keanu with eyes full of emotion. "This is why we're here tonight. Not for us, but for moments like this," Keanu nodded. "Kindness finds its way even when we don't plan it." And just like that, the quiet night had turned into something extraordinary. A simple outing had become a reminder that life's deepest meaning is found not in fame, not in wealth, but in small acts of respect, humility, and kindness. The night was only beginning, but already it felt like a story worth remembering. Unexpected turns in the night. The boy had left the diner, holding his notebook close as if it was a shield against the world. Keanu and Sandra sat in silence, their coffee now cold, but their hearts warm. Yet beneath that warmth there was something else, a quiet stirring, a reminder that sometimes chance encounters open doors to truths we never expected to face. Sandra leaned back, staring out the window at the glowing street. "Funny, isn't it? We came here to escape, but somehow the night keeps pulling us into something bigger than ourselves." Keanu nodded slowly. "Life does that. When you try to hide, it finds you anyway. But sometimes it brings the right people to remind you you're not alone." Before they could continue, the diner door opened again. This time it wasn't a boy. It was a man in his late 40s, rugged face, heavy boots, and eyes full of exhaustion. He didn't notice them at first. He just dropped into a seat at the counter, rubbing his hands together as though the weight of the world sat on his shoulders. The old man behind the counter greeted him kindly. "Rough night?" The stranger only grunted. "Lost my job. Don't know how I'm going to tell my family." The words struck deep. Sandra's hand froze on her cup. She whispered, "People out there fight battles every day, unseen, unspoken." Keanu's gaze stayed fixed on the man. His expression was quiet, thoughtful, but beneath it lay a spark. He stood slowly, walked to the counter, and sat beside the man. The man glanced at him, then did a double take. "Wait, you're—" Keanu raised a hand gently. "Just someone who's had bad nights too. Tell me about yours." The stranger stared at him, confused. But there was something about Keanu's calm eyes that made him speak. He explained how he had worked 20 years in construction, how a sudden company cut had left him jobless, how he feared his children would think less of him. Keanu listened without interruption. When the man finished, his voice broke. "I don't want pity, I just don't want to feel invisible." Keanu placed a hand on his shoulder. "You are not invisible. Not to your family and not tonight. Strength isn't in never falling. It's in standing back up even when it feels impossible." The diner fell silent again, all ears listening. Sandra's chest tightened. She saw in the stranger's pain a reflection of her own lonely nights, nights when she too had felt invisible, despite the bright lights of fame. She stood and walked over, sitting on the other side of the man. "You know," she said softly, "I once thought losing something meant losing myself. But sometimes it gives us a chance to find a new strength we didn't know we had." The man looked at her, his eyes shining. Why are you doing this? You don't even know me." Sandra smiled gently. "Because someone once did the same for me. And it saved me." His hands trembled as he held his cup. He whispered, "Thank you." The old man at the counter poured him another coffee, free of charge. "Tonight we take care of each other," he said with a smile. As Keanu and Sandra returned to their booth, Sandra whispered, "See what I mean? We didn't plan this, but somehow the night keeps pulling us into stories that aren't ours. Yet we belong to them. Keanu looked at her deeply. Maybe that's the point. Maybe we're not supposed to just live our own stories. Maybe we're meant to carry parts of others too. Sandra's eyes softened, but her phone buzzed again. This time she didn't ignore it. She picked it up and her face fell. "What is it?" Keanu asked. Her voice shook. "It's my friend. She's in the hospital. She didn't tell me until now. She didn't want to worry me." Keanu's heart sank. "Do you want to go to her?" Sandra hesitated. "Yes, but I'm scared. I don't know what to say. I don't know if I'll be strong enough to face her." Keanu leaned closer, his tone steady and warm. "You don't need to have the right words. Sometimes just showing up is enough. Sometimes being there is all the strength someone needs." Her eyes glistened. She nodded slowly. "Will you come with me?" He didn't hesitate. Always. They left the diner together, stepping into the cool night air. The city felt different now. Less about lights and noise, more about hidden stories waiting to be found. As they walked to his motorcycle, Sandra's mind raced. She remembered nights alone in hotel rooms, staring at walls, wondering if anyone truly understood her fears. And now, beside her, was a man who didn't try to fix her, didn't try to tell her who to be. He just stayed. On the ride to the hospital, the wind rushed against them. Sandra closed her eyes, feeling the strange comfort of Keanu's steady presence. It was as if the city itself had disappeared, leaving only the two of them and the promise of kindness ahead. When they arrived, the hospital was quiet, its hallways dim, the smell of antiseptic heavy in the air. Sandra's heart pounded as she approached her friend's room. Keanu walked beside her, silent but grounding. She pushed the door open. Inside lay her friend, pale but smiling weakly when she saw Sandra. "You came," her friend whispered. Tears filled Sandra's eyes. She rushed to the bedside, gripping her friend's hand. "Of course I came. I should have come sooner." Her friend shook her head. "No, just you being here now. It means everything." Keanu stood quietly at the door, giving them space, but his presence filled the room like a shield. The friend noticed him and smiled faintly. "You're Keanu Reeves," he smiled softly. "Tonight, I'm just someone honored to witness this moment." Sandra's friend laughed weakly, the sound fragile but full of life. "You two, you remind me that the world still has good people." Those words struck deep. Sandra squeezed her friend's hand tighter. "We'll get through this together. You're not alone." The hospital room fell into silence again, but this silence wasn't heavy. It was warm, alive, filled with the quiet strength of connection. As they left the hospital later, Sandra whispered to Keanu, "You were right. I didn't need the perfect words. I just needed to show up." Keanu looked at her with gentle eyes. And sometimes, showing up changes everything. The night was far from over. Each step seemed to carry them into deeper truths, into moments neither of them had planned, but both of them needed. What began as a simple night out was slowly becoming a journey, one that would test their hearts, challenge their fears, and reveal unexpected lessons about kindness, respect, and resilience. The city around them pulsed with life. But it was their quiet choices, their small acts of staying present, that lit up the night brighter than any neon sign. The next turn in their journey was waiting, and neither of them knew that the most powerful test of the night had yet to come. Shadows of the past. The hospital's automatic doors slid open behind them, leaving Sandra and Keanu standing under the soft glow of a streetlight. The night air was cooler now, carrying with it a hush that felt heavier than before. Sandra wrapped her arms around herself, not from the cold, but from the weight of what she had just faced. Keanu noticed. He didn't ask if she was okay. Instead, he simply stood close, letting his presence steady her. Sometimes silence is the strongest comfort. As they walked toward the parking lot, a group of people recognized them. Phones lifted instantly, flashes lit up the dark, voices shouted their names. Sandra froze. Her chest tightened. This was what she feared most, losing the quiet, losing the sacredness of the night. Keanu stepped in front of her, shielding her gently. "Let's keep moving," he whispered. His calmness cut through the chaos like a blade. A woman in the crowd called out, "Keanu, my son is sick. Can you just wave to him on video? It would mean the world." The security guard nearby frowned, ready to push the crowd back. But Keanu held up his hand. He turned to Sandra and whispered, "Sometimes the interruptions are part of the story." He took the woman's phone, recorded a short message for her son, and handed it back with a smile. The woman's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you. He'll never forget this." The crowd slowly calmed, and as Keanu guided Sandra to the motorcycle, she whispered, "How do you do that? How do you stay kind even when it's overwhelming?" Keanu shrugged softly. "Because I remember what it feels like to need kindness and not find it." His words struck her deeply. They got on the motorcycle, and the city lights blurred past as they rode into the night. Sandra held onto him, her thoughts swirling. She wondered how many times he had faced the world's demands and still chosen gentleness instead of anger. They stopped later at a quiet overlook high above the city. From here, Los Angeles looked like a sea of stars, endless lights stretching into the horizon. Sandra stepped off the bike, staring at the view. "You know," she said softly, "all these lights, and yet sometimes people still feel completely alone." Keanu joined her, his gaze steady on the city below. "Because lights don't make loneliness disappear. Only connection does." Sandra turned to him, her eyes full of unspoken thoughts. "Do you ever feel guilty? Like no matter what you do, it will never be enough for everyone who expects something from you?" Keanu's jaw tightened slightly. "All the time. I've lost people I loved. I've failed people I cared about. Sometimes I wake up at night wondering if I could have done more. But guilt is heavy, and carrying it forever doesn't bring anyone back. What matters is what we choose to do now." Her heart ached at his words. She knew his past, the tragedies that had shaped him. And yet here he was, gentle, humble, refusing to let pain turn him bitter. "You're stronger than people realize," she whispered. Keanu shook his head. "Not stronger, just still trying." Their conversation was interrupted when a car pulled up nearby. The headlights flickered off and a man stepped out. He wore a sharp suit, his face tight with frustration. "Sandra Bullock!" he called. "I've been trying to reach you all night." Sandra stiffened. Keanu stepped slightly in front of her, protective without saying a word. The man approached quickly. "The studio needs an answer. You can't just vanish like this. There's a deal on the table and it's time-sensitive." Sandra's face hardened. "This isn't the time." "You don't understand," the man snapped. "Millions are at stake. You can't ignore this." Keanu's voice was calm but firm. "She said it's not the time." "Respect that," the man glared at him. "You think being the nice guy of Hollywood gives you the right to interfere?" Keanu didn't raise his voice. He only looked at the man steadily. "No, being human does." The tension in the air was sharp. Sandra took a deep breath, stepped forward, and said firmly, "I will not sign anything tonight. My life is not just contracts and numbers. If the studio can't accept that, then so be it." The man muttered angrily, but finally returned to his car and drove away. Sandra exhaled shakily. "Thank you. I hate when they chase me like that. Like I'm just a machine to make money." Keanu gave a faint smile. "You're not a machine. You're a person who needs space. Don't let them take that away." Her eyes softened. "That's what I admire about you. You never let the world decide who you are." "It's not easy," Keanu admitted. "Every day is a choice. But I've learned that if you don't guard your peace, someone else will steal it." They sat on the hood of his motorcycle, staring out at the glowing city. The night stretched on, and with it came a deeper connection. Two people who had spent years under bright lights, finally finding meaning in the shadows. But just when Sandra began to feel the calm returning, her phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a friend or a studio call. It was a news alert. She opened it, and her heart sank. A headline flashed across the screen. Rumors spread of Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock seen together in late-night diner and hospital visit. Paparazzi photos had already leaked. Grainy but clear enough to fuel endless speculation. Sandra looked at Keanu, panic in her eyes. "They've turned tonight into a story we never wanted." Keanu read the headline, then met her gaze. His voice was steady, almost too calm. "The test of tonight isn't whether the world finds out. It's whether we still remember why we were here. Sandra's heart raced. But what if this ruins everything? What if they twist it? He placed a hand gently over hers. Then let them. The truth is what we live tonight. No rumor can erase that. Her eyes filled with tears, both fear and gratitude mixing inside her. The night was no longer quiet. The city below seemed to buzz louder, as if the weight of the outside world was pressing in. But between them, there was still a fragile space of peace. Sandra whispered, "I don't know how this will end." Keanu's eyes held hers, steady and kind. "Neither do I, but we'll walk through it together." And though neither of them knew it, the storm that was coming would test them more than any crowd, any headline, or any past pain. The night had already changed them. But the next twist waiting in the dark would decide if their bond was strong enough to survive the world's gaze. When the night turned heavy, the phone in Sandra's hand felt heavier than ever. She placed it on the motorcycle seat as though it burned her fingers. The headline still glowed on the screen, words sharp enough to cut into the quiet peace they had built tonight. "I should have known this would happen," she whispered, her voice trembling. "We can't step outside without someone twisting it into a spectacle." Keanu looked at her calmly, his expression unreadable yet filled with quiet strength. "Let them write what they want. We know the truth of tonight. And sometimes the truth isn't for headlines, it's for hearts." Her chest tightened. She wanted to believe him, but memories of years being chased by paparazzi and false stories clouded her mind. "But they'll spin it into something ugly. They always do." "And what if people believe it?" Keanu's eyes softened. "People will always believe what they want. But those who truly matter, they see beyond noise." She stared at him for a long moment, the glow of the city lights painting his face in gold. His calmness was almost unreal. "How do you carry it so lightly?" she asked, her voice breaking. "You've lost so much, yet you walk through storms as if they can't drown you." He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked at the horizon, the endless stretch of lights and shadows. "I don't carry it lightly," he said finally. "I carry it heavy, but I've learned not to let it crush me. Pain doesn't disappear. It just teaches you to keep moving even when it hurts." The words sank deep into her. She thought of her own scars, the moments when she wanted to hide, the nights when she wondered if kindness was even worth holding on to. Before she could reply, the distant sound of an engine roared. A black van slowed near the overlook, its headlights dimmed. Instinctively, Keanu straightened. The van pulled to the side, and within seconds, two men with cameras jumped out. Paparazzi. They rushed forward, cameras flashing, voices cutting through the still night. "Keanu! Sandra, what are you doing out here together? Is this a date? Are you finally admitting it?" Sandra's heart raced. She turned away, shielding her face. Keanu stepped in front of her, his voice calm but firm. "Enough. Tonight is not your story." But the flashes continued, relentless, each click like a dagger. Sandra's breaths grew shallow. "Keanu, I can't—" Without hesitation, he guided her back onto the motorcycle. "Hold on," he whispered. The engine roared to life, and within moments they sped off, the night air cutting against their faces, the city rushing beneath them. The paparazzi gave chase, headlights trailing like predators in the dark. Sandra clutched him tightly, her voice shaky. "What if they don't stop? What if they follow us all night?" Keanu's grip on the handlebars was steady. "Then we ride until they tire. Storms always end. They weave through streets, turning sharply, losing one van then another. Finally, after what felt like forever, they entered an old neighborhood where the streets grew narrower, quieter, the lights softer. Keanu slowed, his breath steady, while Sandra's heart pounded as if it might burst. They stopped near a small park. The swing swayed gently in the night breeze, empty, forgotten. Sandra slid off the bike, her legs trembling. "I hate this," she said, her voice breaking. "I hate being hunted like prey." Keanu removed his helmet, his face calm but his eyes heavy with empathy. "I know, but tonight let's turn the chase into a pause. Let's take back the night." He walked toward the swings, gently pushing one so it creaked softly. Sandra hesitated, then followed, sitting down slowly. For a moment, the weight of the chase melted, replaced by the simple sound of chains and the hush of wind. "Do you remember when life felt simple?" she asked, looking at the ground. Keanu smiled faintly. "For me, it was when I used to ride the subway and nobody cared who I was. Just another face in the crowd." She laughed softly, though her eyes glistened. "For me, it was the first movie set. Before fame, before pressure. Just passion and dreams." Keanu pushed her swing gently. "Dreams are still there. They don't vanish. They just get buried under noise." Her eyes lifted to meet his. "Sometimes I wonder if the noise will ever stop." "It doesn't," Keanu said quietly. "But you can choose which sounds to listen to. The cheers, the critics, or the quiet voice inside you." Her chest swelled with emotion. "You make it sound so easy." "It's not easy," he said, his gaze steady. "But it's worth trying." They sat there, swinging slowly in the quiet park, two stars who wanted nothing more than to be human for one night. But the peace didn't last long. From the shadows of the park, a voice called out, "Miss Bullock?" They both turned sharply. A woman stepped forward holding the hand of a small girl. The child wore a thin jacket, her cheeks red from the cold. "I'm sorry to bother you," the woman said, her voice hesitant. "I saw you at the hospital earlier. My daughter recognized you. She's been fighting an illness and she looks up to you." The little girl clutched a small stuffed toy, her eyes wide and tired. Sandra's heart softened instantly. She knelt down, smiling gently. "Hi there. What's your name?" "Lila," the girl whispered. Sandra touched her hand softly. "That's a beautiful name. You're very brave, Lila." The girl's eyes sparkled faintly. "You're my favorite. You make me laugh when I'm sad." Tears pricked Sandra's eyes. "Thank you, Lila. You just made my night brighter." Keanu stepped forward, kneeling beside them. He looked at the little girl with the same warmth he gave the world. "You know what? The strongest people I've ever met aren't actors or heroes in movies. They're kids like you, who keep smiling even when life is tough." Lila's smile grew and her mother whispered, "Thank you, both of you. She needed this." As the woman and child walked away, Sandra's tears finally spilled. She looked at Keanu, her voice breaking. "This is why I can't give up. Because even when it feels unbearable, someone out there finds hope in what we do." Keanu wiped a tear from her cheek with the gentlest touch. "That's the truth the world can't twist. No matter what headlines say, kindness leaves its own story." The night stretched on, but for the first time, Sandra felt the weight lift slightly. They had faced the chase, the fear, the noise, and yet here they were, still standing, still giving, still holding on to the small sparks of kindness that kept the darkness away. But deep down, both of them knew the night was not finished testing them. The heaviest moment had not yet arrived, and when it did, it would demand more strength than either had shown so far. The heaviest truth. The park had grown quieter. Almost too quiet. Sandra sat on the swing, her fingers curled around the chains, her eyes still wet from meeting the little girl. Keanu stood beside her, silent, watching the stars peek through the clouds above. For a moment, it felt like peace might return. But there was an invisible tension building in the air, like the night itself was holding back one last test. "Keanu," Sandra said softly, her voice low. "Do you ever think about what it costs to keep giving kindness when the world keeps taking from you?" He thought for a long moment. "Every day. Kindness doesn't erase the pain. It doesn't erase the losses. But it gives me something to hold on to, something worth waking up for. Without it, I'd be empty." She looked down, her hair falling over her face. "Sometimes I feel like I'm already empty. The cameras, the contracts, the headlines, they all take pieces of me until there's nothing left." Keanu crouched beside her, his eyes steady and gentle. "Then tonight take a piece back. This night belongs to you, not them. You don't have to be what the world demands. You just have to be Sandra." Her lips trembled into a small, grateful smile, but before she could respond, her phone buzzed again. She almost ignored it, but something in her gut told her to look. Her hand shook as she read the message. It wasn't from the studio. It wasn't from the press. It was from her brother. "Call me." "It's Mom!" Her breath caught. She dialed instantly, her heart hammering. Keanu stood close, his presence grounding her. "What happened?" Sandra whispered into the phone. On the other end, her brother's voice was heavy. "She collapsed tonight. They've admitted her." She's stable, but it's serious. You should come. Sandra's world spun. Her knees felt weak. Her hand clutched the swing for support. No, no, not tonight. I can't. Keanu gently placed his hand over hers, steadying it. We'll go together. She looked at him, her eyes wide and scared, like a child lost in the dark. What if I'm too late? What if I don't get to say what I never said? His voice was soft but unshakable. Then tonight is your chance. No more waiting, no more silence. Whatever you need to say it now. Don't let fear steal that from you. Her chest heaved, her tears spilling freely. I don't know if I'm strong enough. Keanu held her gaze. Strength isn't never breaking. It's breaking and still walking forward. They rushed back to the motorcycle, and the ride to the hospital was a blur of lights and shadows. Sandra held on to him tightly, her mind replaying every memory of her mother, the laughter, the sacrifices, the arguments, the unspoken words she had left hanging. Inside the hospital, the sterile smell and bright lights felt harsher than before. Sandra's heart raced as she reached the room. She froze at the door, unable to push it open. I can't, she whispered, her whole body trembling. Keanu stood beside her, his hand hovering near her shoulder but not forcing. You can. Because love waits inside, and love is stronger than fear. She took a deep breath and stepped inside. Her mother lay in bed, pale but conscious, her eyes opening weakly as Sandra entered. Mom, Sandra's voice cracked. She rushed to the bedside, taking her mother. His hand. I should have been here sooner. I'm so sorry. Her mother smiled faintly, her voice fragile but clear. You're here now. That's enough. The weight of years pressed down on Sandra's chest. I wanted to tell you, I never forgot your sacrifices. I never forgot how you stood by me, even when the world didn't. I don't say it enough, but you are my strength. Her mother's eyes filled with tears, and you are mine. The room grew still, the machines beeping softly. Keanu stood quietly by the door, his presence humble, like a guardian who knew this moment wasn't his, but who would stay until the end. Sandra's tears fell onto her mother's hand. Please don't leave me yet. I still need you. Her mother squeezed her fingers gently. Then I'll fight a little longer. For the first time in years, Sandra felt the walls around her heart crack open. She wasn't just an actress or a public figure or a woman trapped by headlines. She was a daughter, a human being, vulnerable but alive. When she finally stepped out of the room, her face was streaked with tears, but her chest felt lighter. Keanu looked at her and asked nothing. He simply offered her a quiet nod, the kind that said, I saw you, and I'm proud you faced it. She leaned against the wall, her breathing uneven. You were right. I didn't need the perfect words. I just needed to be there. Keanu's voice was soft. Being there is everything. They walked out of the hospital together, the night air wrapping around them like a fragile blanket. Sandra looked at him, her eyes filled with gratitude and something deeper. Why do you always know what to say? She asked quietly. He smiled faintly. I don't. I just speak what I've learned from losing and still choosing kindness. Her lips curved into the faintest smile. You saved me tonight. Not by fixing anything, but by standing beside me. Keanu shook his head gently. You saved yourself. I just reminded you that you could. As they walked toward the bike again, Sandra whispered almost to herself. The world will never understand this night. They don't have to, Keanu said, because this night wasn't for them. It was for us. The night was thinning now, the first hints of dawn brushing the sky. But before the light could fully break, one more test lingered in the shadows, and neither of them knew it would bring the hardest choice yet, the dawn of truth. The sky was beginning to soften into shades of gray and pale orange. Dawn was only an hour away, and yet it felt as though Keanu and Sandra had lived a lifetime in a single night. They walked slowly toward the motorcycle, the weight of everything pressing on them. Paparazzi, family, fear, truth. But there was also a quiet strength that neither had expected to find when the night began. As Keanu prepared the bike, Sandra sat on the curb, staring at the street lamp that flickered weakly above. Her voice broke the silence. This night changed me, Keanu. I came out just wanting to escape, but instead, I faced everything I was running from." He looked at her, his eyes soft, his expression carrying that calm patience that had guided her all night. Sometimes the things we run from catch us for a reason. Maybe they're not meant to hurt us. Maybe they're meant to show us who we still are. Her lips trembled into a small smile. "So who am I really?" "You're someone who still believes in kindness even when the world makes it hard," he said gently. "You're someone who stood by a sick friend, comforted strangers, and faced her mother's fragile heart. That's who you are. The headlines will never see it, but I do." Tears filled her eyes again, but they weren't heavy tears this time. They were light, almost freeing. She nodded slowly, letting the words sink deep. They rode through the city as it slowly woke. The streets that had been alive with chaos hours ago now lay calm, almost serene. They stopped at a small bakery that was just opening its doors, the warm smell of bread spilling out into the street. Inside, the baker greeted them with sleepy eyes and a smile. He didn't seem to recognize them, or maybe he did but chose not to say. Either way, there was no flashing light, no questions, only the comfort of 2 cups of tea and a loaf of bread shared in silence. Sandra broke the quiet first. "Do you think this night will disappear once the sun rises? Like it was just some dream that fades?" Keanu shook his head. "Nights like this don't disappear. They leave marks on us, marks no one else can see but us. When life gets loud again, you'll remember this quiet and it will carry you." Her voice softened. "And what about you? What will you carry from tonight?" He looked down at his cup, then back at her. The reminder that even in chaos, kindness still wins. And that sometimes the most powerful thing we can do for someone is simply stay. Her chest swelled with emotion. She leaned across the small table and placed her hand over his. "Thank you for staying, Keanu. Not just tonight, always." For a long moment, they didn't move. The morning light spilled into the bakery, painting them in soft gold. Outside, the city stretched awake. But inside, there was only stillness, 2 souls holding on to a night that had stripped them of fame and left only their humanity. Finally, Sandra pulled back slightly, her eyes searching his. "What happens now? When the world twists this night into something else?" Keanu's voice was steady, a calm anchor against her storm. "Let them twist. Let them write. They don't own this night. We do. And no rumor can erase what we gave, what we faced, and what we found." Her eyes shimmered, and she whispered, "And what did we find?" His lips curved into the faintest smile. That kindness still matters. That respect still holds power. That even in fear, resilience keeps us standing. And that friendship, real friendship, can outshine any headline. Sandra closed her eyes, letting his words settle into her soul. She felt lighter than she had in years, not because the world had changed, but because she had. They finished their tea, stepped out into the soft morning air, and walked toward the bike. As Sandra climbed on behind him, she whispered one final thought. "This night may belong to us, Keanu. But maybe the lesson belongs to everyone." He turned his head slightly, his voice low and certain. "Then let's live it so they can feel it. Even if they never know the details." The engine hummed, the city glowed, and the night that had tested them both finally gave way to morning. It was not a night of glamour. It was not a night of luxury. It was a night of facing fears, comforting strangers, protecting dignity, and remembering what truly lasts: respect, humility, resilience, and kindness. And as the first full rays of sunlight stretched across the horizon, Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock rode on, not as stars on a screen, but as 2 human beings who had walked through shadows and carried light into the dawn. The story of the night was complete, but its lessons would echo forever.